welcome back to Ball with Y'all. It is so great to be here with you today. It is January 26th, a beautiful Wednesday. Well, not really beautiful here in South Florida. The weather isn't all that great right now, but still a great Wednesday. So great to be here with you all today. Thank you for sticking around. If you tuned in for the season premiere about a week ago, I'm really glad to have you. If you are watching on YouTube, thank you so much. I encourage you to watch on YouTube. If you haven't already joined us on YouTube, I believe we're BWI Productions on YouTube. If you're listening, you can check out the description and find the YouTube link on there. Conversely, if you're on YouTube and you want to listen in on maybe you're working out or you're at work or whatever else the case may be, and you just want to listen to the show and don't necessarily want to watch the show, I encourage you. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, Breaker. There's probably some more. There are a number of avenues for you to connect with us. We're also on Instagram at Ball with Y'all Podcast. Feel free to connect with us on there and get to know more about what we were talking about throughout the week as well. So I talked about last time we were here, I said we would recap what we saw over the weekend, and then we would go into what we expect to happen in the weekend or the week ahead. And let me tell you, we are coming off of a wild weekend in sports, particularly in the NFL. And trust me, that will be our lead story here today. We'll also get into National Signing Day. We are 1 week away from National Signing Day. A lot of moves on the horizon. And it'll be interesting to see. Will Texas A&M hold on to that top spot in the recruiting rankings right now? Where does Alabama, where does Georgia finish up? Does Tennessee sneak up close to the top 10 and so on? There are a number of interesting stories to watch. We'll get into that. And then lastly, we'll get into the Arch Manning sweepstakes. Now, if you're not familiar with Arch Manning, just get ready because there's a lot to unpack there. He's only a junior, and there's a lot that is already being written and said about this young man, and he hasn't even remotely been considered he hasn't decided where he's going to be going to school, and it's really early at that point in time. But still, we'll talk about where we think Arch Manning will go, and also to that extent, what it means for the direction of college football. The fact that this young man who's a junior in high school, he's still playing basketball too on the side. What it means for the direction that college football is going, that this young man is getting as much attention as he is. So that's where we're going today. Thank you again for joining us, and let's get right into it with story number one. So story number one, we had a shakeup in the NFL playoffs this week. Now, the last time we talked, I said I thought Green Bay would beat San Francisco. I said Tennessee would beat Cincinnati. I said Tampa would beat Los Angeles. And I said Kansas City would beat Buffalo. I got one of those right. That's really impressive in my opinion. 1 out of 4. We're keeping pace with what we did during the college football season. Of course, we'll start off with Tennessee. They're paying Ryan Tannehill $100 million, right? Former Texas A&M quarterback / wide receiver, former Miami Dolphin quarterback. He wasn't that great for the Dolphins. Then he ends up going to Tennessee, and he's done pretty well. He hasn't done great, but he's done pretty well. It's a whole lot easier when you have Derrick Henry, a Heisman Trophy winning running back, and for that matter, an MVP caliber running back behind you every single down. It makes matters a lot easier. And you've got AJ Brown on the outside, Julio Jones on the outside, and so on. I would say that for the most part, Tannehill's had a little bit easy as of late, but still, he's in this opportunity right here. He's got his running back. He's got his receivers. He's got everybody. He's at home. He's the number 1 seed. He had a little bit of time to rest. The first play of the game, Ryan Tannehill throws an interception. Okay, that's fine, right? They come back. They got a tight game. To begin the second half, Ryan Tannehill's first pass, an interception. And fast forward, it looks like we're going to get into either an overtime or some sort of tight finish. And Ryan Tannehill, his last pass of the game, an interception. So you're paying $100 million for a former wide receiver to throw 3 interceptions. You're the number 1 seed in the AFC. You had a first round bye. You're just now getting your running back off of what I believe he had 3 months off due to surgery. This is your best opportunity in quite some time to do to basically win a Super Bowl, or if not, come very close. And you didn't last more than 60 football minutes over a team in the form of the Cincinnati Bengals, who were 4-12, 5-11 last year. And I get that, Joe Burrow was out last year and so on, but the Cincinnati Bengals aren't the best team in the league. I don't think anyone's sitting here and saying that the Joe Burrow Bengals and the Jamar Chase Bengals are the best team in the country. But that day, on Saturday at 3 o'clock or so on, they were substantially better than the Tennessee Titans and went out there. And although they allowed Joe Burrow to get sacked like 50 times and so on, they went out there and did exactly what they needed to do. They took advantage of the opportunities that Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry really didn't do a whole lot. And some other mistakes that the Titans made, they took advantage of those mistakes and ended up coming away with the win and securing a spot in the AFC Championship game. In the process, speaking of the AFC Championship game, we saw the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills, a wild game taking place in Kansas City. Now, going into that game, I said Kansas City would beat Buffalo. Honestly, I didn't give Buffalo a lot of credit because I feel like we've seen this movie before, right? Buffalo is a really good team, right? But when they get to that big moment, how do they respond? I kind of equate Buffalo to what a lot of us had seen Georgia as of late, or even like in Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley, where they're really good. You know they're going to get there every single year. They're going to get close, but they're not going to overcome that last hurdle. They're not going to climb the mountain. They're not going to beat Goliath. And in this form, in this case, Goliath is, of course, Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. But what was really impressive about this game, Buffalo, they held their own for a while, right? I believe it was 13-13 at halftime or somewhere in that neighborhood. It was a very tight game for a long time. And then toward the very end, Josh Allen, who played basically a perfect game for the Buffalo Bills, he put together some beautiful drives toward the end. Gabe Davis, former UCF wide receiver, I believe he was a freshman in that 2017 year where UCF claimed a national championship. Gabe Davis had the game of his life, 4 touchdowns, more than 200 yards receiving. Josh Allen played an incredible game. And so when Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs get the ball back with 14 seconds to go, and they have to go at least 40 yards to get inside field goal range to send this to overtime, I thought the game was over. I was laughing when the Buffalo Bills scored with 14 seconds to go. I thought it was hilarious because you had 25 points scored in the last 2 minutes, 3 lead changes, and then ultimately 1 tie. And I would say, and I think it's pretty fair to say, this is the best playoff game to ever exist. It might be the best NFL game to ever exist. And it's really remarkable because I don't think any of us expected Buffalo to do this well. And I know some people were picking Buffalo and some people thought that Buffalo could come out victorious, but Buffalo actually had a realistic shot to win this game. Now, the flip side of it is a lot of people are pointing at the overtime rules and saying, well, Buffalo could have won the game. They could have had a shot if the overtime rules weren't set up to be the way they are, where if you score a touchdown on your first drive and you won the coin toss, then you might just win the game, right? But this isn't the first time this has happened. You look at, I believe it was the 2013 or 2014 NFC Championship game where Green Bay was playing at Seattle, and they had a pretty substantial lead. They ended up blowing the lead, go to overtime. Aaron Rodgers, he had to score pretty late in the fourth quarter to send the game to overtime. And Seattle Seahawks and Russell Wilson, they win the coin toss. A couple plays into the overtime period, there was a bomb down the field, I want to say, to like a Golden Tate kind of character, something along those lines. And that was the end of the game. And Aaron Rodgers did not see the ball again. And that set up for Russell Wilson to play the New England Patriots and for Malcolm Butler to win the game with that interception at the 1 yard line. If we had not had that overtime rule in place at that point in time, we might have gotten a Rodgers-Brady Super Bowl in 2014. But instead, we got Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks against the New England Patriots. So it's not the first time. You also saw, I believe, 2017 or 2018 when Kansas City and New England did the same exact thing. But in that situation, New England came out on top because they won the coin toss. This isn't the first time. It's not going to be the last time. But I think you look at it from the flip side, there's not a right answer, I would say, because you look at college, I think the first 2 or 3 quarters sets up well, and then you get into those constant 2-point conversions that we saw in the Iron Bowl, we saw in the Penn State-Illinois game. That's an extreme in the opposite direction. So if anything, if we can walk away with this game with any sort of insight or maybe a rule change or whatever else, maybe we need to revisit those overtime rules. But I want you to keep in mind, this is not the first time that this has happened. So just because Josh Allen didn't get to see the ball again after scoring with 14 seconds to go doesn't mean that the rules will automatically change, because it didn't change for Aaron Rodgers. It didn't change for Patrick Mahomes the first time around. So I'm not really sure that it's going to change anytime soon. We also saw, of course, the Green Bay Packers. This one hurt me a lot because I picked the Packers to win the Super Bowl. I said, if they don't do it now, when will they do it? And it's not now, as it would seem. They scored 10 points, and it seemed like it was a comfortable game. I wasn't really comfortable the whole time, but I saw it and I was like, okay, just hold the 49ers, just keep them at bay, right? And you'll be fine. And for the most part, they did well. Jimmy Garoppolo played a horrible game. He's not a good quarterback. And for anyone who thinks that he is, I don't know what you're looking at. I don't know what you're watching. He has not been a good quarterback for quite some time. And the fact that the Patriots drafted him and then Tom Brady felt threatened is kind of laughable because of looking at how bad Garoppolo is. But on the flip side of course, Garoppolo did have that knee injury 3 or 4 years ago, and he kind of really hasn't been the same ever since. Regardless, that San Francisco defense was incredible. Of course, Aaron Rodgers, he had a 7-point drive to start the game. Seemed like the Packers are going to walk away pretty easily, comfortably, right? And then you had a blocked field goal, and that really kind of made things a little awkward. And then Aaron Rodgers could only throw to 2 guys, right? He was only throwing to Devontae Adams. He was only throwing to Aaron Jones. Al Lazard just did not exist. Marquez Valdez-Scantling did not exist. Mercedes Lewis existed on the second drive, and then he fumbled, and then he didn't exist. Begora couldn't catch the ball to save his life. There were so many opportunities for this Packers team to just survive and advance, right? And then take on the Los Angeles Rams and see what happens. But no, Aaron Rodgers, in his first playoff game of the year, after a bye, much like the Tennessee Titans, went out there and lost. For the first time since 2010, the 2 1 seeds both went down in the divisional round. That showed you just how wild this weekend was. And then, of course, speaking of a wild weekend, Tampa Bay was down 27-3 against the Los Angeles Rams at home, which raise your hand if you thought the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would be down 27-3 at home in a playoff game in the divisional round. Nobody. 27-3. Tom Brady, a ridiculous comeback. The fact they were able to bring it back, because there were numerous points of time where I looked at that and said, okay, that's done. And that's done. And okay, they didn't convert there, game over, right? But Tom Brady somehow pulled it together, and exactly when his team needed him, he did it, right? And he gets close enough. And much like what Patrick Mahomes did toward the end of the Kansas City Buffalo game, Matt Stafford, 2 ridiculous passes. One on the left sideline, I believe, to Cooper Kupp, and then one straight down the middle to put him in with a chip shot field goal, basically, to win the game. So we saw 4 games that ended on the last play of the game this week. And the first 3 games all saw the underdogs winning on game-winning kicks. I don't think I've ever seen an NFL playoff weekend quite like what we saw this past weekend. So I'd like to revisit my Super Bowl pick. I said that Kansas City would play Green Bay. I said Green Bay would win the Super Bowl. Well, obviously Green Bay won't win the Super Bowl this year. So who is going to take home the Super Bowl trophy, the Lombardi trophy? Well, I think Kansas City has a pretty easy road. I don't see Cincinnati giving them too much trouble. I know Cincinnati beat them about a month ago, but it's really hard to beat the same team twice, especially in that short of a window. On the flip side, I really want to pick San Francisco because that defense really terrified me when they were facing off against the Green Bay Packers. But I really like the Los Angeles Rams. I really like Matt Stafford. I really like what Odell Beckham Jr. has been able to do. He kind of reinvented himself as of late. Cooper Kupp is a ridiculous athlete. It's incredible because I don't think a lot of people would expect that out of him, and he has done it. He's gone out there and broken records and really set himself apart from a lot of other guys out there, especially when you keep in mind that Robert Woods, massive receiver for the Rams, went down earlier this year. And so now Cooper Kupp has taken on that extra load, and he has done it so well. They have Sony Michel, former Georgia running back. That defense with Aaron Donald and Von Miller and Jalen Ramsey, it's loaded. Terrell Lewis, former Alabama player. It's a loaded team. And I know at one point in time when they started to make all these moves, people said, okay, this has got to be a boom or bust situation. And I think they could boom. I think they could get to the Super Bowl. In fact, they should get to the Super Bowl. I'm pretty sure they are favored to beat the 49ers this weekend, as they should. And honestly, I can't put my faith in Jimmy Garoppolo to win another game because he didn't beat the Packers. And he really didn't beat the Cowboys either. His team, his defense, his running game, beat those teams. So I'll go Los Angeles and Kansas City. And just to be different, I'll say Los Angeles, but I don't really have a whole lot of reason to say that. But here's a fun fact that I saw that I think it would be relevant for you all. If Kansas City and Los Angeles both win, which again, they're both favored to do, Kansas City will be the only team to have to face an opponent in their home stadium in consecutive Super Bowls. Of course, they faced Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl last year. And then, of course, the Super Bowl this year is in Los Angeles. And if the Los Angeles Rams were to win and the Kansas City Chiefs were to win, they would play LA in LA. Pretty cool stat. I don't know if that means a whole lot, but a cool stat nonetheless. So we're going to have a lot more fun here in the coming weekend. Again, I told you Kansas City and Los Angeles are my two picks to make the Super Bowl. We'll see how that all unfolds. I have been very wrong as of late, so hopefully that is not a jinx for those two teams, but we'll see how it all unfolds here in just about 3 or 4 days. On to story number 2. So the race for Arch Manning is heating up. Now, who is Arch Manning? If you're not familiar with Arch Manning, let's talk a little bit about who this young man is. Of course, you're probably familiar with the name Manning, right? Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, Archie Manning, right? Peyton Manning won 2 Super Bowls, I believe, for the Colts and the Broncos. Eli Manning, of course, just sucked the life away from the New England Patriots in, I believe, the 2007 and 2011 Super Bowls. That family is ridiculous. They have roots all throughout the SEC. Arch Manning is the son of Cooper Manning, who's kind of I wouldn't say he's the forgotten Manning because he's very relevant. I believe they had a College Bowl show with Peyton Manning back in the fall, and Cooper was a co-host on there. Cooper seems to be very funny, right? Very likable man. And now his son, Arch Manning, seems to be the next great Manning talent. And he's looking at a number of schools, but he's a junior in high school right now. So he has a ton of time, right? And he's still playing basketball and doing a number of other things, just being a kid. But these schools, the Alabamas of the world, the Georgias of the world, the Clemsons of the world, the Texases of the world are gunning after this young man, and they're recruiting him so heavily. I saw there was a thing over here. I saw something I read the other day said that Saban and Smart, Coach Nick Saban from Alabama and Coach Kirby Smart from Georgia, both went to basketball games at Isidore Newman because Arch Manning is playing for Isidore Newman in basketball right now too. However these guys can get their eyes on this talent, they are doing it. So like I said, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas, and Clemson, those are your 5. I did see a report that said Florida and Ohio State might be in the running as well. I don't know where that came from. That was just a couple days ago. We'll see if that actually materializes in it to anything. But right now, it seems like the big 5 are Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas, and Clemson. So he's a very prized prospect. He's the best quarterback in the country for 2023. I believe he's the best player in the class of 2023 as it stands right now. Obviously, the best in the state of Louisiana. So from top to bottom, this is one of the most prized prospects in quite some time. Now, where will he go, though? I don't see him going to Texas because, well, for a number of reasons. One, Texas is about to have to go into the SEC, and you're gonna have the same amount of competition wherever you go. Might as well try to have as much talent around you. I know Texas just announced that name, image, likeness deal where they're going to give the offensive linemen $50,000 each, which is cool and all. But I feel like if you really want talented offensive linemen, you're going to need to give them more than $50,000 a year, right? It just doesn't really seem like that sets the bar high enough to protect a guy like Arch Manning. And then on top of that, I mean, Texas is just falling apart right now. And I know Steve Sarkisian's only going to be in year 2 here, and they could turn it around. But right now, it does not look all that promising. And I know things will look a little bit different here in the Big 12 with Brent Venables at Oklahoma and no more Lincoln Riley and a lot of other moving pieces with TCU and so on. But I really don't think that Texas is a good fit right now. And to that extent, I don't think Ole Miss is a good fit, mainly because that's Eli Manning's school, right? Eli Manning, I believe they retired his jersey this year. That's Eli's school. And to that point, there's already a ceiling at Ole Miss. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. He's an Ole Miss fan, and he was talking about, he's like, I've come to realize that, they had 10 wins this year, I believe. I might not see 10 wins again for quite some time. And that's just because of the ceiling that exists at Ole Miss. When it comes to talent, when it comes to the region, it's very easy in the SEC to go from second to seventh, right? To go from 10 wins to 4 wins just because of how difficult it is in the SEC. And I don't really know that Arch Manning is going to want to be in that situation, especially when his uncle, Eli, already pretty much owns that school. I don't see him going to Alabama. That Alabama quarterback room is already loaded. Looking forward, they've got Jalen Milroe and some other guys. I don't really think that he wants to insert his name in there. Obviously, he'd probably be the top guy in that conversation, but even still, why do it? And on top of that, everybody wants to beat Alabama. Maybe eventually you transfer to Alabama like Jermaine Burton's doing from Georgia to Alabama right now. But for the most part, these top guys, they want to go out there and beat Alabama. Yes, I know sometimes and a lot of times Alabama gets a number of 5-star guys, but very rarely do they get the number 1 overall player, because that number 1 overall player usually wants to go out there and beat the best. They don't want to add to the best because they consider themselves to be the best. So I don't see Arch Manning wanting to go to Alabama. I think Georgia could be a safe option, but I really do like Clemson in this conversation, because I think Clemson, for a number of reasons, it gives him an easier road to success. To that point, you think of the ACC. Wake Forest had a good year. They're not going to be great next year. Pittsburgh had a good year. They're not going to be great next year. Miami's going to start to rise here shortly. Florida State's going to kind of be over the next couple of years. So Clemson's probably going to rise to the top here in the near future, right? And Dabo, I think the next year especially is going to be incredibly important for Dabo to kind of reassess and reestablish himself as a leading coach in the country. I think this will be a prove-it year. And in that prove-it year, he needs to prove it to Arch Manning. He needs to prove it to Arch Manning that he can run this program and that he can give him the keys to run the program effectively. Because Trevor Lawrence was a generational talent. DJ Uiagalelei has not been that great. And there are a number of other guys in that Clemson locker room right now that could take the keys, but Dabo hasn't made that move yet. So I think Dabo needs to, especially this year, show Arch Manning that he's willing to take that risk and that he's willing to give Arch the keys to the program. But now, why is Arch Manning so valuable, right? I think it speaks to the direction that we're going in college football. I think it speaks to the direction that we're going as far as you live or die by your quarterback. I understand that the team who just won the national championship this year did not have a great quarterback. Stetson Bennett is not a good quarterback. I don't care if he's listening to the show. I don't care if I run into him at Walmart. He's not a good quarterback, right? He's serviceable. I would equate him to a Greg McElroy for Alabama in 2009, where he was a game manager, or early stage A.J. McCarron in 2011 and maybe even 2012, right? That won national championships but didn't really deserve to be there. Jake Coker in 2015. Blake Sims could have done it in 2014, right? Stetson Bennett is not a guy that excites you, right? So for the most part, the quarterback position matters a whole lot more than it did this year. And it almost did in this year as well, because look at Bryce Young. Tore apart the best defense in the country, and then when they had the second chance to try to fix things, they did, and it worked out well for them. But look at all the other teams in the playoff, right? Michigan didn't have a good quarterback, didn't fare well. Desmond Ridder is probably the second best quarterback that was in the playoff this year for Cincinnati. That didn't go too well either. In fact, I believe he had a career low game against Alabama. And as we saw throughout this year, unless you had just a transcendent quarterback under center or a transcendent performance from a quarterback that was usually average, like Zach Calzada for Texas A&M against Alabama, you're not really going to do all that well. I mean, Bo Nix isn't the best quarterback in the world, but look at the drop-off from Bo Nix to TJ Finley, right? I think the more that we see this direction in college football with Arch Manning and so many other guys, we're pushing for offense. We are pushing for, we need this guy, this one individual, to lead our program forward. I can promise you, the day that Bryce Young decided not to go to USC and decided to stick with Alabama, coming out of Modern Day or whatever the name of school is out in Southern California, was a substantial day for Alabama and for Nick Saban and so on. Because look at Paul Tyson. Paul Tyson would not have cut it for the Crimson Tide. Jalen Milroe seems to be a good quarterback coming out of Houston, same area as Jalen Hurts did a few years ago. But Jalen Milroe is young. I believe he's going to be a sophomore this year. He's not going to cut it for quite a while either. You look across the SEC, all these different programs, if you have a strong quarterback under center, you're probably going to do well. Kentucky wasn't like the best quarterback situation for them, but Will Levis did just enough, right? And especially in the SEC, you need a strong quarterback that can take you forward. And I think that's only going to become more prominent as Oklahoma joins the conference and Texas joins the conference. And we start to see some of the realignment and we start to consider playoff expansion conversation. You need a quarterback that when all else fails, he can go in there and take care of business, like the Iron Bowl. When all else failed, Bryce Young, when it mattered the most, went out there and took care of business. Arch Manning, wherever he goes, is going to have that level of expectation. And that's why I think ultimately Clemson could be the best bet for him, because the ACC does not compare remotely to the SEC. And really, it's about like a 3 or 4 game season for Clemson than it is a 12-game season in the SEC, 12, 13, 14, or so. We'll see how that unfolds. We're not going to really know a whole lot for the foreseeable future, but it's really interesting to see that a lot of people are really keeping track of the story and watching where all these coaches are going as Arch Manning continues his recruiting process. Now we'll go over to story number 3. I want to talk about some trends in the SEC, right? National Signing Day, like I said, is 1 week away. And I want to talk about who's trending up and who is trending down, right? I've got 4 programs that are trending up. And I've got 2 programs that are not exactly headed in the right direction as well. So let's start off with Texas A&M. I believe they are trending up right now. Of course, they are number 1 in recruiting. They just added DJ Durkin as the defensive coordinator from Ole Miss. They also just added Steve Adazio from, I believe, Colorado State or somewhere in that neighborhood as their offensive coordinator. If Texas A&M pulls off this number 1 class on Wednesday, it'll be a massive feat for Jimbo Fisher. It'll be a massive feat for that program, because for so long, they've invested so much money to try to get that football team back on track. Because, I know Johnny Manziel was there, but even when Johnny Manziel was there, they were what, a 10-win, a 9-win program? Last year, there was so much expectation, and they finished 8-4. Didn't make a bowl game. Well, they made a bowl game, but didn't play the bowl game. I think there's something that Texas A&M has to prove to all of us, because the last time we saw them play, they lost LSU, who fired their head coach. And yes, it would have been great if they had been able to play in the bowl game, but they didn't even do that. And I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of speculation as to why that took place. I'm not going to get into it. But the last time we saw Texas A&M, they lost LSU. And over the last 6 weeks, they've only continued to up their stock right now. And if they hold on to this number 1 class come next week, they're looking well for the foreseeable future, at least the next 4 years. My other team that's moving up right now, Kentucky. They're sitting number 11 nationally in the recruiting rankings and 4th in the SEC. I think there's a lot of momentum coming off of the 2021 class and 2021 year. They just added a highly ranked receiver from Alabama in the form of Javon Baker via the transfer portal. I think there's a lot that Kentucky fans have to be excited for. You think about the contract situation for their head coach right now, Mark Stoops, where basically he can be there as long as he wants. And he's about to become the winningest head coach in Kentucky football history, passing Bear Bryant. I don't even know what success looks like beyond that, because he's already done wonders for the program as of late. And I think Kentucky continues to grow. And the fact they're number 11 in the country right now when it comes to recruiting, I mean, imagine that 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Remarkable job that Mark Stoops and that team and that coaching staff has done as of late to really boost their stock among the recruiting levels as of late. Missouri at number 12. They're sitting number 12 nationally, 5th in the SEC, just behind Kentucky. There's a lot of unknown right now for Missouri, because, the transfer portal and a number of other things are happening that are kind of outside their control. They don't know who their quarterback's going to be and so on. But the recruiting class in particular is incredibly encouraging. Last year, they finished 27th in recruiting, right? But they currently have a letter of intent from the nation's top receiver, and they're also getting secondary help from the transfer portal via Clemson and Texas A&M as well. You think about one of the big areas for Missouri this year was their defense was terrible, right? They're getting transfers from Texas A&M. They're getting transfers from Clemson. I believe they're getting some transfers from the Big Ten as well. Missouri's moving in the right direction, right? From an offensive standpoint via the recruiting trail, and also from a defensive standpoint, particularly through the transfer portal. I know a lot of people have a lot of thoughts on Eli Drinkowitz, but I think he's doing well with the program as of late. On to our last program that is moving up right now, the South Carolina Gamecocks. Shane Beamer's Gamecocks are sitting 24th nationally. They're 11th in the SEC as far as recruiting goes. It's a big winner in the portal right now when you think of course, Spencer Rattler. Some other moves in the portal that really have helped them as of late. But Beamer, he's really created a lot of excitement, right? If you think about a year ago, I talked about Missouri finishing 27th, I believe, in recruiting last year. South Carolina finished 79th in recruiting a year ago. 79th. And now they're sitting 24th. There's a lot of excitement in South Carolina. There's a lot of excitement around that program. And I think it speaks to what Shane Beamer was able to do this year. Again, we talked about it before. The ceiling at one point in time seemed to be 2 wins, 3 wins, 4 wins for South Carolina. And then they went out there and got a 7-win season, including a bowl win over North Carolina, which is basically one of their, I wouldn't really call them a rival, but a team you want to beat, especially in that region of the country. An incredible job by Shane Beamer. We'll talk more about Shane Beamer. I know I've teased this numerous times over the last few weeks. Shane Beamer has been an incredible coach for the Gamecocks, and honestly, he's shocked a lot of us because I didn't really have a whole lot of expectation for him. Coming off of, I believe, Muschamp was the coach before him. Muschamp burned that program into the ground. Before that, I really couldn't tell you who Muschamp took over for. It may have been Spurrier, but really, South Carolina has not been relevant since 2013. Right? I believe 2013 they finished 4th overall in that final poll. This is a great opportunity for them to finally get back to relevance. And honestly, Shane Beamer has done an incredible job, and I'm really looking forward to what all he will do, especially with National Signing Day being a week away. And our two teams that are kind of moving in the wrong direction, I hesitate to say they're moving down because they could be fine, but I'm not really loving the position they're sitting in right now. Auburn and Ole Miss. Auburn, they're 16th nationally in recruiting right now, 7th in the SEC, and there's been a lot of internal change, right? This isn't so much related to recruiting. I mean, some of it's recruiting. Sitting 16th nationally, they're okay. But there's been a lot of internal change. I saw Derek Mason is out as the defensive coordinator. And I some other moves as well. They were promoting internally. But here's the thing. Auburn a year ago was the 4th best defense in the country, not in the country, in the SEC. They were strong. And yes, I know they had some personnel issues when it comes to their roster, and Bo Nix comes out and so on. But their defense was consistent. And the offense had a lot to prove, and it ended up not doing that. But I think this could be that prove it year. But if Brian Harsin is going to prove something this year, he needs the inside to be firm, right? He needs the core of his team to be firm. And right now, with Derek Mason moving on, we don't really know where he's going at this point in time. I'm not really loving the position that program's in right now. And to that extent, the reason I don't love Ole Miss right now, who's sitting 23rd nationally and 10th in the SEC, a lot of internal change right now, a lot of uncertainty right now. And it feels like their future is somewhat dependent on the transfer market, right? Are they going to get Jackson Dart? Are they going to get JT Daniels? Who will be their quarterback a year after Matt Corral, right? And how do they avoid just tanking in the year without Matt Corral? Because Matt Corral, a lot of people don't give him enough credit for what he did, because a lot of people remember the first year where he was throwing 5 or 6 interceptions against Arkansas. This is not the same quarterback, right? He's about to go out there in the NFL draft and really be a star for some team. Whoever it is, whoever picks him up is lucky to have Matt Corral. And if you're Ole Miss, without Jeff Levy going to Oklahoma, without DJ Durkin, who we mentioned going to Texas A&M, how do you fix the problems, the massive gaps you have right now? Clemson, when they lost all their coordinators, they could just promote internally. I don't think Ole Miss has that luxury because of who they are. Clemson, again, different type of program. It's comparing apples to oranges. I don't know that Ole Miss is in a good position right now. And again, sitting 10th in the SEC, how is Lane Kiffin sitting 10th in the SEC? I know 23rd nationally sounds good, but 10th in the SEC right now, not far away from Florida, who at one point in time was behind Vanderbilt. That seems a little discouraging if you're an Ole Miss Rebel fan. And I know a lot of this could change on National Signing Day and in the months ahead, right? And depending on who Kiffin hires and what all happens from the coaching standpoint. But right now, I'm not loving where Ole Miss, I'm not loving where Auburn are at all as far as their programs go for the foreseeable future. So that wraps it up for the second episode of season 2 here with Ball with Y'all. Again, we talked about who we see going to the Super Bowl. I like Kansas City, and I like Los Angeles to make it to the Super Bowl on February 13th. We talked about the Arch Manning situation. I have him going to Clemson. We'll see if that unfolds. I don't know. There's a lot of time, but there's a number of schools out there. Also, I just want to mention this here. Florida, watch out for Florida because, they just hired the new head coach out of Louisiana Lafayette, Billy Napier. He's a good head coach, right? And at one point in time, they were behind Vanderbilt in recruiting, and now they're slowly moving up. Now they're number 13 in the SEC, and I believe they're top 40 or so on in the country. I believe Billy Napier is going to turn that program around, and I wouldn't be surprised. I know a latecomer, as I mentioned earlier, with Ohio State and Florida. I wouldn't be surprised if Arch Manning considers Florida, but we'll keep an eye on that. For now, I still like Clemson a lot on that front. And of course, we talked about our trends in the SEC. Texas A&M, Kentucky, Missouri, South Carolina are all up. Auburn and Ole Miss are on the way down. So a lot's going to unfold here in the next week. I hope you enjoy National Signing Day. In fact, the next time we talk, we'll be on National Signing Day. So there's going to be a lot that's going to unfold on that day. I really enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoyed the episode as well. Again, feel free, like, subscribe, rate, review, comment if you're on YouTube. We love engaging with you all. Check us out on Instagram, Ball with Y'all Podcast. And as always, thanks so much for allowing us to talk some ball with y'all.